Well, hello and welcome to today's episode of the Power of Your Mind podcast. You're listening to episode number 129. I'm Victoria Gallagher, Law of Attraction hypnotist and number one best-selling author of Practical Law of Attraction: Align Yourself with the Manifesting Conditions and Successfully Attract Your Desires. And I'm also the founder of HipTalk.com and HypnoCloud apps, which gives you access to over 500 hypnosis recordings right in the palm of your hand. So be sure to download that app from the app stores. Today, I have a very special guest with me, Ariel Garten. Ariel Garten is probably one of the most interesting people you will meet. She is a neuroscientist, a mom, a former psychotherapist, former fashion designer, and the co-founder and visionary of an amazing and highly successful tech startup, Muse. Muse tracks your brain during meditation to give you real-time feedback on your meditation, guiding you into the zone and solving probably one of the biggest problems that people have when they are starting a meditation practice. Muse lets you know when you are doing it right. And so when Ariel's not reading brains literally or investing in inspiring and advising other startups and women in business, you can find her on stages across the world from TED to MIT, teaching audiences about their brain and how to overcome its limitations, consistently giving her audiences the practical tools and insights that they need to help them become their best selves. And she can be found on the website choosemuse.com. She can also be found as the podcast co-host on Untangle and also on Facebook at Choose Muse, Twitter Choose Muse, and Instagram Choose Muse. And so today, Ariel is going to be sharing some of her insights on the neuroscience of meditation. So welcome to the show, Ariel.
Thank you. It is a sincere pleasure to be here.
It's a sincere pleasure to have you on the Power of Your Mind podcast. I was so excited when your interview came through because I've actually been a fan of yours for a number of years as I've used the equipment that you are a co-founder of. So,
Oh, that's so awesome. Thank you.
yes, and it's we'll get into that a little bit, but tell us a little bit about how you got into meditation and how you got into this, and let's just get started.
Sounds great. So I have always been fascinated by with the brain and the mind and how they work. When I was little, I was curious about the world and why it functioned the way it does, why your table's hard, why do things look like they're red? And then I became really fascinated with us and why we process the world in the way we do. Why do we see that as red? Why does the color red give us an emotional experience? So I went to school for neuroscience to try to understand the thing that we have up here, our brain, and how it interprets and creates our experience of life. And along the way, I began working in the lab of Dr. Steve Mann. So Steve was one of the inventors of the wearable computer. He's the guy that literally made Google Glass before Google did. And he had this early brain-computer interface system. So he had a system with a single EEG lead that you'd put on the back of your head. And then by focusing your brain state, by focusing or relaxing, shifting your brain, we could then take that signal coming from your brain and do something with it. So we would use it to actually change the audio that you'd be hearing or to change the lighting around you. And so we were experimenting. It's totally wild. We were experimenting in the lab of people being able to literally make the sounds get lighter and make the lights get brighter all with their brain.
That is so cool. That is
It was
so cool.
amazing. And so I got together with my co-founders, Chris Amony and Trevor Coleman, and the three of us were like, what do we do with this? This is extraordinary. You can literally interact with the world with our brain. What are we going to do? And we went on to crazy projects, we let people control the lights on the CN Tower at the Olympics, and created thought-controlled tools and technologies. But the whole time we kept asking this driving question of like, how is this actually going to be useful? How is this going to actually be practically applied in people's lives? And as we were having people focus and relax to shift their brain state to like make a light bulb get brighter, we realized the real power and the real value here is that we were teaching people to focus and relax and then showing them what was going on in their own mind. And that
That
we
is so
actually,
cool.
yeah, like we actually had this tool to take the invisible, intangible processes that go on in our mind and make them visible and tangible and give them feedback. And that this process of teaching people to focus and relax, it was actually a whole lot like meditation. And that if we could only get more people to meditate by making the invisible process of meditation visible and tangible and engageable, we could probably do some real good for the world.
I love that. My search for how I ended up finding out about your company a few years back was, as a lot of people are familiar with biofeedback, and the electromagnetic waves in your body, the way that they work. I was actually curious if there was some kind of like an EEG machine or something that you could hook up to let you know when you are, entering like an alpha or a theta or a delta state. That was actually what my search was. So I was like literally searching for what it is that in a way you offer. And so that is really cool. So let's kind of get into, for most of my audience is familiar with meditation, but I'd like to hear your point of view on like what meditation actually is. Why does meditation work? And what is it that actually happens in our brain when we're meditating?
Okay, those are a lot of big questions and
Yeah.
awesome ones. So, what is meditation? I mean, there's many, many different definitions of meditation and many different forms of meditation that people practice. The definition of meditation that I use is a practice or a training that leads to healthy and positive mind states. So, you're training your brain regularly to do something that's going to be positive for you. And the kind of meditation that we use inside of Muse is a focused attention meditation. So, in a focused attention meditation, what you're doing is you're putting your attention on your breath. When your mind wanders away from your breath, which all our minds do, you notice that it wandered, and then you choose to return your attention back to your breath. So it's this very simple little process: attention on your breath, mind wander, notice, and return. And this very simple little process can lead to some incredibly transformational results.
That's
So
amazing. Yeah.
yeah, so most of us go through the world just on autopilot. We just go through the world with the thoughts that are in our head, and we assume that those thoughts are supposed to be there, that that's just what's in my mind. And once you do this process of putting your attention on something, noticing your mind wandered onto a thought, and then choosing to take your attention off that thought and put it on something that matters to you, even if it's as simple as your breath or your work or the person in front of you that you're listening to, at that very moment, you have changed your relationship to your thoughts. You are no longer just subject to having a mind that's filled with content that happens, but you are instead the person who can now choose the contents of your own mind. Choose the thoughts that you feed, that you put your attention to, that you reinforce, and those that you move your mind away from. And when you start to do that process, typically the next step is, well, I am not my thoughts. And so all the things that they've said about me and the world around me, those don't necessarily have to be true. I can have choice over those as well. And so it becomes this incredible pathway to transform your relationship to both your thinking and to your experience of the world and what is.
That's amazing. Yeah, and I've been a student myself of Vipassana meditation. I'm not sure if you're, yeah, you must be. And, and it's exactly like that. We focus for many, many hours a day on the one thing, breath. But it is the one thing that it is consistent that we have to do. And it's not about, causing the breath to be a certain way, but just noticing and observing the breath. And I think that that's a wonderful way to, to monitor and gauge how often we do actually lose focus. And so I love the way that your app and your headset works with helping a person to get back and think about what's important, and training the brain and training your mind to act. And would you say we're training both the brain and the mind at the same time?
Yes, great question and great distinction. So you're training the mind because you're training your awareness of your thoughts. And so you're literally training the contents of your mind. And you're also training your intention or attention. So where you choose to put your attention then indicates your intention in life. And then you're literally training your brain. You are creating neural circuits associated with what you choose to attend on. You are strengthening your prefrontal cortex, the area of your brain associated with attention. And you are, often starting to decrease or downregulate the pathways that play through those thoughts that you don't choose to think about, the ones that you're choosing to let go of. And what we put our intention on and what we put our time on actually strengthens in our brain. You're creating new neural connections. What fires together wires together. So through that act, you are literally both changing your mind and your brain. And there is fantastic research demonstrating this. So there is a series of studies from Dr. Sarah Lazar out of Harvard, and she took intermediate and long-term meditators and put them in an MRI machine. And she said, what is going on in the brain structurally? What seems to change? And she saw that there was an increase in the thickness of the prefrontal cortex of a long-term meditator, so that part of your brain associated with attention. That's also associated with your higher order planning, your higher order consciousness, your cognition. She saw a downregulation of the amygdala. So the amygdala is the part of the brain that governs your fight or flight response and your fear. Some research has demonstrated increased connectivity of your corpus callosum. So the corpus callosum is the tract of your brain that connects the left and the right hemispheres, and you can see a thickening in that area in some long-term meditators. And then she also saw an increase in the density of gray matter. In one study that she did with an intervention of just 8 weeks of mindfulness meditation, she saw an increase in the density of gray matter over just 8 weeks. And the amount of gray matter in your brain is the number of connections or the density of your neuronal mass.
So ultimately, in English, like, what is the what is the benefit of having more gray matter?
So just to give you one example, Einstein had more gray matter than the average individual.
Okay.
So the more gray matter that you have in an area indicates the relative usage of that area and the capacity of that area to have, thinking and engagement.
So ultimately, it helps us to be smarter and to figure things out and problem solve and all of those things.
So meditation is yes, gray matter helps us to think, problem solve, do whatever that part of the brain is supposed to do. So more gray matter in your hippocampus, for example, which is the area of the brain associated with learning and memory, suggests that you may have increases in learning and memory. And actually, improvements in the volume of the left hippocampus is something that we see in long-term meditators.
That is great. That is great. So, can you talk to us a little bit about the neuroscience of anxiety, fear, and bias, and how we can use a meditation to overcome that?
Totally. So you got the quick little neuroscience primer there on parts of the brain associated with meditation. We're going to zoom in on the prefrontal cortex and the amygdala. So the amygdala is a little area kind of in the middle of your brain, and it is the part of your brain that is associated with the fight or flight response. It's the part of your brain that is constantly scanning for danger and looking out on the horizon to see what it is that could be threatening to us. And those could be real threats like snakes and tigers and fires, or they could be perceived threats like the subject line from an email that comes in, or the people over there that might be talking about you, or the wrinkle in your pants before a meeting. And so our amygdala is firing and sending off both thoughts about the dangerous thing. It's being like, you're stuck in traffic. This is going to be terrible. Think about this because it's going to be terrible. And it's triggering the physiological response in your body when something fearful happens, aka when we're stressed. So that's the predictable, tensing of the shoulders, increasing of the heart rate, a little zip of energy. Um, and so the amygdala is great for short-term responses to real danger, not so great when you have this chronic response in your body of, oh no, there is something wrong, the sensation of anxiety. So in a long-term meditation practice, we actually see a decrease in the size of the amygdala that you can see in some long-term meditators, and a decrease in the activation of the amygdala. So meditation actually is literally calming the brain. It's calming that part of the brain that is associated with fear responses. Part of why this might be working is that meditation increases the activity of the prefrontal cortex. So the prefrontal cortex, as I mentioned, is the part of your brain right at the front. It's right under your forehead there. And it's the part of your brain that's associated with planning, thinking, higher order processing, metacognition, awareness of what's going on. And it's kind of like the prefrontal cortex is the parent and the amygdala is the scared child. So in a meditation practice, we are strengthening our prefrontal cortex, our ability to focus on something, our attention, our reasoning. And we're actually also training our prefrontal cortex to inhibit the amygdala. So it's kind of like the parent is able to look around and say, hey, everything's okay, even when the child is freaking out and going like, oh no, there's a shadow on the wall or a wrinkle on my pants. And then the prefrontal cortex can step in and say, hey, we see that actually everything's okay. We can calm right down now. The meditation practice strengthens the prefrontal cortex, down-regulates the activity of the amygdala to calm the amygdala. So ultimately you end up with more reasoning, more ability to stay calm in difficult situations, and the ability to make better assessments about what's really going on in the world around you and what you should be afraid of and not.
Makes sense. So, how long does it take a person to get to that point where they're more in control of their brain and their
So
thinking?
yeah, in Sarah Lazar's study with just 8 weeks of meditation, it demonstrated that, 8 weeks, which really meant people were meditating every day for 8 weeks, but in
Mm-hmm.
just 8 weeks, you could actually see some real change in the brain.
Mm-hmm.
When we look at long-term meditators, this is another cool study from Dr. Eileen Luders, and there she looked at long-term meditators and looked at the aging of the brain. And she looked at things like the thickness of the prefrontal cortex, the size of the hippocampus, and she determined that long-term meditators had brains that looked, on average, 7.5 years younger than
Ooh,
non-meditators. And she defined a long-term meditator there as somebody who'd been meditating for 5 years or more.
5 years or more. And like for how long a day or at a time would would you be able to get those kind of benefits?
So, meditation is something that you need to do regularly as a practice in order to see the benefits, just like going to the gym or eating well.
Mm-hmm.
And for most people, you start with the practice of 5 minutes a day or up to 10 minutes a day.
Mm-hmm.
Typically, studies looking at the effects of meditation could be looking at about 20 minutes per day. In studies that we've done specifically with Muse, we tend to look at 10 minutes per day, and we see impact in people's levels of stress decrease, their levels of fatigue decrease, improvements in cognitive function. In one study that was done at the Mayo Clinic using Muse with breast cancer patients awaiting surgery, women who were using the Muse starting at just 3 minutes a day, so they started really gently and worked up as to the length of time that was comfortable. After 3 months, we're seeing decreases in their stress and fatigue and improvements in quality of life. So
Wow, that is amazing. So just
yeah,
3 minutes a day, you could start off and you could literally have a younger brain and in as little as 5 years, which, I mean, that's not a long time. I've been meditating for, a couple of decades.
yes.
And so, when you think of the amazing benefit, I mean, that could potentially help a person live longer. If you have a younger brain, you could potentially live longer and live uh, a more quality life.
It's the question of quality of life that starts immediately. It's one of those things like when you go to the gym, you just feel better and everything else gets easier. And when you
Mm-hmm.
start meditating, the world just gets better. And it
Mm-hmm.
gets better for multiple reasons. And that's the amazing thing about meditation, because you both are being more present in the moment and, more able to be present. So your life just feels better because you're present. You're calmer. So everything feels a lot less stressful and more pleasant because you're calmer. And you're actually improving your physiological systems in your body and your mind. And so it really is one of those things that just pays back in spades.
It's so true. I have, because I've been meditating for so long, I mean, I just don't really have too much reaction to certain things. I mean, I'm able to observe what's happening and act accordingly, but not like overreact, or not like, if I'm in traffic, or if I'm having, a difference of opinion with somebody, I'm not like quick to react. But sometimes people will think, like, oh, don't you care? And it's like, no, I do care. Yeah, I care, but it doesn't do any good to,
Yeah.
and that is one of the things that does seem to go away with a lot of I mean, have you found that to be true with a lot of people, that they just not lose the ability to react, but just have more control over their reactions? Like, things just don't seem to bother you at near as much.
Oh, yeah. That's probably the most common thing you hear about meditation.
Yeah.
And I noticed the transformation happening in me too through my meditation practice. And like everything just feels calmer, and you look back and you're like, why would I get so fussed? Or you watch somebody get fussed about something and you're like, I can understand why they're getting fussed, but I'm just not feeling it. Like, I know it doesn't serve me or help me to get, to be dramatic about this or to get a reaction about it. I actually know the right way to interact in the situation is like sit calmly, listen, and then choose a good outcome that's not going to rouse anyone.
Exactly. Perfect. And
So
what
helpful
would
in
you
arguments with
say?
my husband, by the way.
Yes, definitely. Well, and it would be helpful in this environment that we're dealing with these days, all of the things that we're dealing with these days. And so, what would you say as far as having a quality meditation versus, I mean, some days you have the meditation where you really really feel like, wow, that was a great meditation, and I went deep, and I was calm, and I had fewer than usual interruptions or distractions in my brain, versus, sorry, a cat was scratching the rug, versus the, some days you'll just have a meditation that's just like, oh my goodness, I just cannot stop thinking. And no matter what, more than 10 seconds goes, less than 10 seconds goes by, and you're on to the next thought. Like, um, as far as having like a quality or a not so quality meditation, does that also play into the benefits that we're getting out of it? Like, does having a more high quality meditations lead to more benefits, or does it matter?
That's a great question. So there are so many things to be learned from meditation, like so many different skills you learn in this one little activity, that you can get something meaningful from both of them. So when you're in a quote unquote quality meditation, when you're, really focused, you're in there, you're calm, your mind doesn't wander that often, you're able to stay in the zone. That's fantastic. I mean, in those moments, you're really deeply training your brain. You're bringing your brain to a state of quiet rest. You're in a brainwave state that's actually very healthy and restorative for your brain. And you're probably also quite relaxed in your body. So your body is spending time in a state of rest and digest. So it's also getting all the physiological benefit of, relaxed blood vessels, slow heart rate, and all that good stuff. When you're having a day when your brain's bouncing all over the place, that's okay too, because you are learning so much in that moment. Meditation or focused attention meditation is not about your mind going blank. And that's a really common misconception, that you just want to be in the Zen zone and it's going to be great. Because most people's minds don't go blank, and certainly not for long periods of time. Levitating might be more possible than like completely blank mind. So
Yeah. It is a
those,
big misconception.
yeah,
So many people is like, oh, I can't meditate because I can't clear my mind.
it's like, that's okay. What we're doing in those moments is we are observing our mind. So we're observing when it jumps from thing to thing. We're observing the qualities of our mind. And then we're giving ourselves a choice when your mind wanders about, what do I do about it? Do I bring my attention back to my breath, or do I follow the wandering thought? So every time you notice that your mind has wandered and then choose to bring it back, that is a huge win. That right there, the noticing and the returning, that is also strengthening your attention, strengthening your ability to direct your attention from one thing to the next, strengthening your inhibition, your ability to let go of your thoughts. It's repatterning your brain, because your brain is used to just, going to these thoughts and staying there. And every time you say, nope, we're not going to do the conditioned thing we're used to doing, you're literally reconditioning your mind. And you're also being aware of your mind and how to work with it in different states, because our brain is different every day. Some days we're just super zen and that's awesome. And some days our brain's all over the place. And so you need to know how to engage with yourself and work with yourself at those times. And then in those times, it often gives us a whole other set of things to learn from. So there's probably a lot of self-judgment in those moments. And that becomes a great moment of teaching. Like, how can you be compassionate to yourself in the time of, when you feel like you're not doing that well? What does it mean to not, quote unquote, do that well? What does that mean to you? There's all sorts of things that we rub up against that we can now encourage ourselves to bring to acceptance and to unpack. So it's huge.
Yeah, I like that. And, it's like a workout. I think of it as like a workout for the brain and the
Totally.
mind, because it's helping you. Because in your day-to-day life, when you're, say, I'm working and I'm literally all over the place. Oh, I got to check my email. I got to check Facebook. I got to check Twitter. But I'm really supposed to be writing a script. And meditation helps you to catch yourself when you're in the middle. It's like, oh yeah, I'm writing a script. I need to close down all my other windows and let myself just focus on this one thing for a certain period of time. And I believe that doing the meditation, it's just like a reminder, and it's an exercise that reminds your mind when you're, in your ordinary everyday life and you're getting into your old habits again. It's like, oh yeah, time to refocus again. Not judge myself for doing what I was doing. Now it's time to refocus again.
Exactly. 100%. Let that go. Come back to what matters. And, in that little focus time that you're doing your meditation practice, you're able to work out so many things. So, a lot of people who are used to jumping from thing to thing, when you are forced to sit there for 5 minutes, you might feel your body wanting to get up and jump, like wanting to get up. But it's like, no, this is my meditation time. I'm not going to. And so as you observe that process of your body wanting to do what it normally automatically does, and then intervening and say, actually, no, that automatic behavior isn't necessarily serving me. I'm going to make a different choice. You are choosing to recondition your actions and your patterns. And so, I've noticed things like, the checking the phone. That was the very first thing that faded away from me. I used to always want to jump and check my phone. And then after meditation practice, that impulse had just been reconditioned. And it's like, oh, those urges, those things that come up inside of me, I don't need to follow them. I can make a higher order choice here, and I can override.
I notice it occasionally for me. I will, because I meditate fairly frequently, like at least once a day, and sometimes twice. But occasionally I just have this urge to stop my meditation short. What do you say to somebody who just you can't seem to overcome the urge in that moment? And it rarely happens for me, but occasionally it's just like, I can't do this anymore. I gotta go do whatever it is that I'm thinking about doing. And what would you say? I mean, should you really try to resist that urge, or just, every once in a while pay attention to that because maybe it's just, you're just not getting anything out of the meditation in that moment.
So in that moment is where the work is.
Yeah.
So in that moment, you then ask yourself, why do I feel so driven by this? What is underneath that? What do I feel like would be accomplished by that other work I'm doing? Is it actually that important? Where are my goals? How does this align? Just because I feel something in my body doesn't mean I need to run after it and be driven by it, because then I'm just being, driven by my base desires. And it may well be that there's something really important you have to do, and like a person you didn't want to disappoint, and that mattered. And so go up and do the things so you don't disappoint them. Or it may be a false construct. And so those are the moments where you can start to really unpack our, unconscious autopilot behaviors and decide if they work for you.
That is an amazing answer. Thank you so much. That really, really, really makes a lot of sense. So, how can we use meditation for more leadership development?
Oh my God, in so many ways. Okay, so meditation is one of the things that makes us an extraordinary leader, because leadership is not about telling a bunch of people what to do. Leadership is about listening to a team, finding a great team dynamic, and inspiring people forward. So meditation, another cool neuroscience study reference, has been demonstrated to improve the area of your brain associated with compassion, empathy, and perspective taking. So, those are three incredible leadership qualities where you are now able to be compassionate and empathetic to the people that you're working with. Listen to them, be patient with them, not fly off the handle, the whole, calmed reactivity that we were talking about before. And then as a leader, not in an interpersonal sense, but in a personal sense, it allows you to do things like find work-life balance, and also to be able to get very clear on your goals and what you should be paying time and attention to, and then help you become more efficient at doing the work.
It makes so much sense because these are really the true qualities of a leader. They're not necessarily the qualities that most people think about when they think about leadership, but that is so true. So, how can a person also ignore their naysayers in pursuit of their dreams? Because so many people here on Power of Your Mind podcast are in pursuit of some sort of dream. We're using the power of our mind to pursue our dreams. But occasionally, you're going to have those naysayers that tell you, you can't do it, you're wasting your time. What do you say to being able to just ignore those people?
Okay, so I would say there's a few different kinds of naysayers. There's the naysayer inside of you, and let's deal with that one first. So the
Yes.
the naysayer inside of you, most likely, like 99% of the time, is the inner critic. And the inner critic tends to say things that are not helpful and not useful. And typically it's trying to keep us small. It tends to be the internalized voice of the parent that when we do something wrong, the parent says, you shouldn't have done that, you're awful, do this, blah, 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 blah. And so we use this voice inside of us to try to motivate ourselves to do better, but it always holds us back. So, meditation is a really great method of being able to listen to and observe your thoughts and be like, whose voice is that? Is that really serving me? Is that fear? Because, often that naysayer inside of you is just fear. And when you deal with the root fear, when you calm the amygdala, when you calm yourself in regards to the situation, then that naysayer voice can begin to dwindle away. And you can begin to choose the contents. Like, okay, this is what I want to do. I can understand that there may be some fears here. There may be some actual barriers that I can deal with, but let me deal with them logically rather than in this, trapped emotional way. The naysayers may also be people who are outside of you. And, those can fall into two classes. One, the class of people you can just ignore. And believe me, there are lots of those. And you can actually have the right to just ignore anybody who is not aligning with your vision, unless that person is your partner or somebody you have chosen to spend time with or have to spend time with, in which case you usually have to actually confront it and find out why they are naysaying. And when you do that, you discover that the naysaying typically comes out of care for you. They're saying no because they're trying to protect you. And so typically, when you explain why this thing is important to you and why you think it's going to work, and maybe what your backup is if you don't, just to try to allay their fears and to demonstrate that you've thought about this, typically their naysaying tends to fade away. And if you don't want to have that conversation, just the understanding that their naysaying is probably coming from caring and concern can allow you to shift the impact that it has on you and to say, like, hey, that person's just caring about me. They may not actually know what's right for me, and that's okay. So I'll take the care and I'll give back the parts where they don't know what's right for me, and I'm going to make my own choice.
That's a great way to assess that situation too, because so many times we'll take things personally or think maybe they don't believe in us or, just misconstrue their intention when usually there is a positive intention. So that's a great, great answer. So let's talk a little bit about this device that helps us to get better at meditating. This Muse device. Can you talk a little bit about just a little bit like how you came up with the idea and what it is, what it does, and why somebody might want to purchase one?
Sure. So, as I mentioned my story at the beginning, I was working in neuroscience and I worked with this lab with this early technology, and we recognized that it could give people insight into their own mind during meditation. And that's important because most people, when they go to sit down to do a meditation practice, they're like, what's going on in here? Like, what am I supposed to be doing in your meditation practice? And so we recognized that with what became finally Muse, we could actually give you real-time feedback on your meditation to let you know when you're focused and when your mind was wandering. It's literally like a little coach, sitting inside your
Mm-hmm.
head, guiding you in your practice. So what Muse is it's a slim little headband. It's kind of like a Fitbit, but it goes around your forehead and it tracks your brain waves in addition to multiple other sensors. And it translates the sound of your meditation into guiding sounds. The metaphor uses your mind as like the weather. So when you're thinking or distracted, you actually hear your mind is stormy. And as you come to quiet, focused attention, it quiets the storm. So it's this really beautiful audio feedback where you're listening to your meditation. And then every time your mind wanders, you hear the storm pick up. And that's your cue to be like, oh, yeah, mind wandering, right, back to my attention. And it really quickly teaches you to stay in that attention zone, to that meditation zone, and reinforces you for being there. And then after the fact, you get data. So charts, graphs, scores, things that show you what your mind was doing and help you see the progress of your meditation session after session. And then on top of that, we have tons of content. So we have a guided subscription with hundreds of meditations from top teachers to help you with anything that comes up in your life. So whether it's sleep, stress, anxiety, relationships problems, frustrated standing in line, whatever it is, we have a meditation for that that helps you really understand what's going on inside of you at that moment and help you find reframe and focus.
That is wonderful. And I can say personally, I've used it. And just for the audience that may not realize, there's also an app. That's how you read the data. And it's really amazing. And to me, it also helps motivate you to want to get better and want to improve because you can literally see how well you're doing. And I think how well a person is doing at something is an indicator, it kind of gives you a little bit of a boost, a little bit of ambition and motivation and optimism to see, like, oh, I mean, either way, whether you're doing well, you want to just continue to improve, or if you feel like, well, I'm kind of slipping a little bit, then you can see that too. And so it really gives you a boost of self awareness. So I really, really love the idea of this. And so I've just really enjoyed our conversation. And I wanted to let our audience know that you've created a website for our audience where they can find out more information about Muse and talk a little, and learn a little bit more about this. There's a discount code in case you were wanting to purchase one of these wonderful headsets that is going to help you help you improve your meditation. And the discount code is Choose Muse. Is there anything else you wanted to add?
Um, yes, you can go to choosemuse.com/welcome, and the code is choosemuse. And then the other thing that we're really interested in is sleep. So, we've been thinking a lot about meditation during the day as a way to harness your mind and how you then harness your mind to sleep at night. So, we actually recently came out with a new device, Muse S, that gives you all of the benefits of meditation training in the day and also helps you fall asleep with a whole host of new sleep features coming. So,
Ooh.
to us, it becomes this virtuous sort of 24-hour cycle of meditating during the day, understanding your mind, sleeping better at night, and then being more well rested, and better emotional self control to really be able to ramp the cycle forward.
That is amazing. And sleep, I mean, it's so important and so imperative also just to be a more productive, well rounded person. It's just one of those things that we don't really think too much about the quality of our sleep and getting enough sleep. And so I really commend you for having something that will help a person to enhance and increase the quality of their sleep, which is going to continue to enhance the quality of their life. So thank you very much.
Oh, thank you. This is such a pleasure.
Yes, thank you.